We did just hear from Congressman Dean Phillips. Now we will hear from his Republican challenger, Tom Weiler, a former Navy submarine commander and a first-time candidate. And joining us now is Tom Weiler. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me here.
All right, I want to ask you about the 3rd Congressional District. The 3rd Congressional District used to be solidly Republican. They hadn't had a Democratic congressman since 1961 until Dean Phillips won 4 years ago. And the last presidential election, Joe Biden won by 20 points. How do you reconcile that with running a Republican campaign in that district?
Well, you're right. There's definitely a strong conservative base in the 3rd District. I think there was a lot of headwinds that Congressman Paulson went up against when Congressman Phillips defeated him 4 years ago. And fundamentally, the big issues that I hear on the minds of voters in Minnesota's 3rd District are inflation and crime. And clearly the Biden administration, along with the support and votes of Congressman Dean Phillips, have completely failed on those two issues. So I really do think that this district is there for the taking for Republicans. And one specific fact in particular, the district, about 40% of the district self-identifies as independent voters. And clearly, as a true independent, pragmatic Minnesotan voter, citizens in Minnesota's 3rd District are not going to look at where we are with inflation and crime and think we are, on the right track.
And I would agree, independent voters are a huge chunk of voters in the 3rd District.
Absolutely.
Also, independent female voters, and every poll, including this latest governor's poll, show they are breaking in large part for Democrats because of the abortion issue. You are against abortion rights. What kind of exceptions do you believe in, if any?
Well, as I've already stated, I believe in exceptions for rape, incest, and for the life of the mother. And I think that abortion is an extremely critical issue. Obviously, it should be an emotional and intense conversation because we're fundamentally, discussing two unalienable rights: the life of the baby and the liberty of the woman.
Right. But is that where this district is? I mean, I'm just thinking that your positions, which are completely valid, appear to be far to the right of what CD3 is right now.
Oh, I actually think my position is much more mainline and centerline relative to Congressman Dean Phillips' extreme position of his vote in 2021, where he voted to allow for on-demand abortions up to the time of birth. That's actually, by polling, much more extreme than any position I've laid out here.
Okay, well, on-demand abortions up to the time of birth are incredibly rare and almost always done for the life of the mother. But I want to ask you, let's talk about Dean Phillips. He beat Eric Paulson, a long veteran congressman, by 12 points in 2018. And then in election, you can't just say, oh, that was a Democratic year, because in 2020, he won by 11 points. That's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of the moderate, pragmatic, independent voters in Minnesota's 3rd District, times were good, life was good, and rightfully so. They had the luxury to vote maybe against a president they didn't like the way he tweeted, or against or on social issues. But now, with crime at record highs, inflation at 40-year highs, the votes of Congressman Dean Phillips and the failed Biden administration is clearly having an impact on day-to-day life for Minnesotans in the 3rd District, everything from buying gas to putting food on the table. And I think Minnesotans in the 3rd District are ready to turn the ship around.
All right. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act has done a lot of things, but one thing it hasn't done yet is reduce prices, especially in things, basic necessities like food. I know that that's one of your main issues.
Absolutely. It's really a disingenuous title. Clearly, Democrats acknowledge that it's not going to do anything with inflation. And if anything, it's going to make inflation worse over the next couple of years. So that type of disingenuous messaging to the American people really has dangerous effects on people. If people start making financial decisions based on the fact that their government lied to them and said, we're going to pass a Reduction in Inflation Act, where they knowingly know that it doesn't reduce inflation, that's bad policy and that's bad government.
Well, it does reduce some things like the cost of health care in some situations and drugs, but in terms of groceries, as I talked about with Representative Phillips, it doesn't, and that's why a lot of people may vote Republican.
Well, absolutely. I do think many people will vote Republican because, inflation is still going up on groceries. So clearly the Inflation Reduction Act did not do anything to address that critical issue in Minnesota's 3rd District.
Okay, well, Tom Weiler, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show this morning, and I very much look forward to my upcoming 3 debates with Congressman Dean Phillips to make sure Minnesotans in the 3rd District understand the 2 candidates and compare and contrast us as we start early voting later this week.
Well, Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District has some of the highest education levels of any district around the state, so I'm sure voters will be tuning in.